Well, good morning. It is an honor to be here with you. I just had to sneak in one joke because of the car situation I thought of. There was a lady who was panicking. She had locked her keys in the car. She called the police. I said, "Yeah, we can come out help." She goes, "Would you please hurry to? It is pouring out," and I left the windows down. Anyway, I am very grateful to be here. I'm thankful to Bob Conklin and I'm especially grateful for the administrative glitch that occurred leading to me being invited to speak. So that's why I'm here. But normally when I give a presentation, I rush through my background to get to the good stuff. Well, I was asked to share my testimony, so I guess we'll never get to the good stuff. But I'm actually sneaking some good things in there. And I promise you the next 4 hours are going to fly right by. James 1:19 says, "Be slow to speak," but it doesn't say speak slow. So I go fast. You have to put up with that for a little bit. And every truly gifted speaker always makes three major points, no more, no less. So with that in mind, here are the 2 points that I'm going to be covering. I'm going to be talking about why I'm here and where I'm going. And this will apply to everyone. And my current bio, just to say what's going on now, I am the founder and managing director of the Starting Point Project. We call it that because everyone has to start somewhere with their beliefs. We basically help Christians better understand and better defend the Christian worldview. And also, I wanted to pull up a picture of Jerry. I figured he'd get a little nervous when he saw his picture up there, but he's already told you the connection. So when I first felt called into full-time ministry, I had my own computer programming business, shut that down. I didn't know what I was doing, trying to form a nonprofit. So I got together with Jerry. He was extremely instrumental in getting us off the ground. I still have no idea what I'm doing, but it's going really well. So I'm thankful for that. Along the way, I was also invited to be on the board of directors of a group called Logos Research Associates. I was president for the last 3 years. The reason I'm former president now is I was on 88 planes last year from my own ministry, including that one, I think. Just traveling all the time. So I told the group, I just don't have time to be president anymore. I'm still part of the group, but I just can't take the time to be on the board. Logos Research Associates. This is the world's largest consortium of scientists who are Christians and biblical creationists. The man who founded it, Dr. John Sanford, he was from Cornell University. He is worldwide famous for having invented something called the gene gun. Inserts genes into the DNA. He was actually an atheist for most of his career there, but became a Christian, brilliant scientist, one of the world's leading scientists. Then there's Dr. John Baumgartner. He's a PhD geophysicist. He just happened to build the world's best 3D computer simulation of plate tectonics, just off the charts, brilliant. And as smart as these guys are, I mean, they are brilliant. Out of all 8 board members, I was the tallest. So pretty proud of that. Here's an overview of the ministry, 19 plus years full-time, but 41 years of speaking and researching. I've given over 3,700 lectures all over the United States, 9 other countries. I've spoken at the U.S. Naval Academy 5 times. They want it to be an annual event. I've spoken to West Point officers 5 times. They want that to be annual. I'm actually headed out to the U.S. Air Force Academy for the first time this summer. Lead Grand Canyon tours. Here's a picture from the top of Horseshoe Bend. We actually raft around the river there, and then later in the evening we go up topside to take sunset pictures. It's incredible. We hired our daughter, Tori, about 4 years ago, so I get to work with my own daughter full-time, and it's an honor. We get along so well. She's so gifted, so talented, so I'm thankful for that. Our son, Taylor, has been on some of my tours, but another tour, a group flew me down to do some lecturing. They wanted to hike all the way down to the bottom and back up. Our tours are family-friendly, but we did that together. That was quite an experience, and he and his wife just about 8 months ago had their first child, Lydia. It was a lot of fun. And then my wife, Amy, and I, we've been married 33 years in a row, so we got some momentum going. And we actually had our first grandchild. You might remember that from the previous slide. It was so weird. The same time our son had a child, we had a grandchild. I don't know how that works. Amy's been on some of my Grand Canyon tours, but since then we added a few new things, like going to the top of Horseshoe Bend, and should you really wanted to see, hiking through the beautiful orange wavy Antelope Canyon. So she got to do that. That was a lot of fun. So you can tell it's the first grandchild. The second one won't get so much airplay. I do podcasts. We released about 170 every Friday, and new one comes out. They're all free. We're being heard in 84 countries. I take no credit for that. It's all God. I'm just sitting in my own basement office, no windows, saying stuff into a mic, and now it's all over the planet. I've written 3 books. I didn't bring anything. I'm not here to sell anything, but the book that I wrote on creation, I've been told by some of the world's leading scientists, I think it's the best overview that's out there, which I was honored to hear, and my granddaughter loves it too. So that was my brief current bio, but now we're going to do what Paul Harvey would do and tell you the rest of the story. He was so good at that. He'd be talking about some obscure young kid, and then at the end he'd say, and that young boy was Abraham Lincoln or something like that. He was so gifted at that, but spoiler alert, this is going to be me. It's about me. So that's who the background's going to be about. So my background, what led to me being here today. I was actually born in Waukesha. I was born at Waukesha Memorial Hospital. My dad was born there. I was born there. Our 2 kids were born there, and now our granddaughter was born there. I think it was the same doctor too, but no. So we got some history of being there for a while. And I was raised in a Christian home, and you can see very clearly that is a Christian home. My parents raised me learning about the Bible. They told me the Bible is the Word of God. And guess what? I believed them. Why did I believe them? Because they're my parents. And I went to church, and they told me the same thing. I believe them because they told me. So it was kind of a blind faith, which is how life works. You're growing up, you believe what your parents tell you. It's kind of blind, and later you think through it a little bit more yourself. But I was raised to believe the Bible cover to cover. I went to Lowell Elementary School, into public schools all the way through high school, Lowell Elementary School. Nothing occurred there to make me doubt the Word of God. I went to Butler Middle School. Again, they were teaching a few things that were contrary to what was in the Bible. It didn't really bother me. Nothing that caused me to doubt my faith. Waukesha North High School, same thing there. I was learning different things, but it really didn't make me doubt my faith in any way. Then I went to John Brown University in Arkansas, Christian University, to study mechanical engineering. That's where life gets a little more serious. You're in college, you're kind of out on your own, but it was a Christian university, so that actually strengthened my faith. But after I got a degree in engineering, I became more interested in physics. They didn't have a physics major. So I came back to Wisconsin and went to UW-Whitewater to get a degree in physics. And that's when everything blew up, because all my professors were telling me I was wrong about everything I believed. And I realized I know what I believe. I just don't know why. I never really thought about it. It's true. And I never really thought about why it's true or how to defend it. And here I was surrounded by PhD scientists who I assumed had a lot of evidence for what they believed. And I felt like I got nothing. Well, I'm actually very thankful to UW-Whitewater and all my professors, even though they were telling me I was wrong and they were challenging me. It made me the person I am today because it forced me to dig a little bit deeper. So God used it very powerfully in my life. So they were telling me I was wrong about everything. Well, what does that include? Well, some things would be like I was wrong about my thoughts of the origin of the universe, origin of life, the origin of man, including our purpose here. I was wrong about the Bible. They told me I was wrong about Jesus, and I was wrong about the afterlife. That's a lot of stuff to be apparently wrong about when you're 21 years old. So I really had some thinking to do. So I went from being in shock to being in Spock. And my point here is thinking it through logically. I'm a very logical thinker. There is nothing wrong with emotions. In fact, back in I think it was 95, I actually had an emotion. And it was really scary, but I was able to work my way through it. My wife says that's not too far from the truth. But I really wanted to think through this rationally. So here's my line of reasoning. I'm being told that I'm wrong, but I don't think that I'm wrong. But if I'm not wrong, that means I'd be right. And if I'm right, there's got to be evidence. And if there's evidence, I'm going to find it. I was driven to find it, not because I was smart or anything special. I loved my parents so much. I had a great Christian upbringing. I loved them so much. I thought, well, I don't think they're wrong. So if there's evidence, I'm going to find it. So I started doing a lot of research. And I had to make a choice. Was I going to continue to believe that the Bible is a fact, or was I going to be convinced, no, it's just fable? I really had to work through that. So welcome to my journey, and I'm going to tell you kind of how I went through this and some of the things that I discovered along the way. So let's start out looking at this first one. I had to take any topic that came up and think through it with this grid, logically. Okay, what does the Bible teach? about this topic? Well, they taught A. Well, my professors were claiming that B was true. Well, what would my research, reveal? That's the kind of the grid I went through with all of these things. So we'll start out looking at the origin of the universe. Well, what does the Bible say? Pretty straightforward. Ah, Lord God, it is you who made the heavens and the earth. By your great power and outstretched arm, nothing is too hard for you. That's what the Bible says. But my professor said, no, the universe is a result of the Big Bang, which came about on its own through natural processes, not as a result of any intentional design or purpose. That's what they, PhD scientists, were telling me. Okay, well, what did my research reveal? That was very interesting. And I have to perform a miracle the whole time and be really brief. There's a lot of stuff I have to skip. But I realized there are only 3 options when discussing the origin of the universe. And here are the options. Number 1, it was created by something, or maybe it was created by nothing, or it was created by something, or it's always existed. Those are the only options. You can spend the rest of your life. You will not come up with another option. That's it. Well, the idea that the universe was created by nothing, we should be able to rule that out immediately. Nothing is nothing but nothing. The whole idea is it doesn't exist. It can't do anything. So it makes no sense to say that nothing created the universe. I'm going to skip to the last one. The universe has always existed. It didn't have a beginning. It didn't need a creator. Many scientists used to believe that, but they pretty much ruled that out for many reasons, one of which is if the universe was eternal, it would have run out of gas a long time ago. And so even secular scientists realize, no, the universe did have a beginning. Well, that leaves us with the second option, that it was created by something. Philosophically, that's certainly a possibility. Maybe something created the universe. But it's pretty vague. Something. What was that something? We only have 2 sub-options as to what that something might have been. One option would be the universe itself. That something that created the universe is the universe. The universe created itself. Well, you could rule that out. It makes no sense to say that something created itself. That's totally illogical. Well, if it wasn't created by itself, the natural world, it must have been created by something outside of itself, outside of the natural world. Well, what do we call things outside of the natural world? We call those the supernatural world. Super just means above or beyond. Well, that's when the alarms go off. There's a separation of church and state, and you can't have that. Well, I asked myself, what tests and experiments have they conducted to figure out there's nothing outside of this natural world, nothing outside of the universe, nothing of a spiritual nature? None. They can't do any tests. Science is powerful, but it deals with matter and energy. It doesn't deal with non-physical world. So they can't do a test to say there is nothing outside the natural world. They just don't like that option and won't allow it to be taught in the school system. And I also realize this something, whatever it is that created the universe, must be timeless, outside of time. If it created time, it can't be part of the thing that it's creating. It also must be non-physical. If it created the physical world, it can't be part of the thing that it's creating. It also must be very powerful to do a whole universe, must be very intelligent to do all the details, and we'll just scratch the surface on a little of that in a few minutes, and must be personal. Why would I say that? Because it chose to create the universe. How do you know it chose? Well, if it didn't choose, that means it was forced to create the universe. All right, you tell me why whatever it was forced. Who forced it? That makes no sense. It makes more sense it actually chose to create a universe. It didn't have to. And then it must be loving because of everything that I experience in life. I think this creator is a loving God. That fits in perfectly with what I already believed that the Bible teaches me. So that went well. Again, we're not going to touch on all these. We just don't have time. We're going to skip to the origin of man. The origin of man. What does the Bible say? God created man in his own image, male and female. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Jerry mentioned that verse. What do my professors tell me? That we evolved from an ape-like creature beginning about 6 million years ago, and we're nothing more than a higher evolved animal. Then when you act like animals, they get mad. Like, well, that's what you taught me I am. So what did my research reveal? Well, very interesting. I know one thing that we're taught is that humans and chimps are 98% identical in their DNA. It's like, wow, that would be pretty powerful evidence that we've evolved from a common ancestor, right? That's complete myth. Complete myth. And the leading scientists, they know that now. Just hasn't trickled down to the educational system. It's probably closer to 85, which is a massive problem. If we're 85% identical in our DNA, that means we're 15% different. That equates to 450 million differences in our DNA. The rungs on the ladder, they're called nucleotides. 450 million differences between chimps and humans today. You cannot account for those differences through Darwinian evolutionary process. Mutations, accidental copying errors, because these differences aren't just random. They're very positive, constructive, related differences. They're all good. You can't generate that by making copying errors in the DNA, which is how evolution operates. And then all the alleged ape men started looking into that. There were a lot of frauds out there where they absolutely lied about things for sometimes 40 plus years, and it was in all our textbooks, taught as fact. I looked into the other ones too, and I started seeing, wow, there are problems. They're just making up stories with a lot of these things. But then I was told that the story of Adam and Eve and the garden and all that, that's just myth, that's mythological fable, some old ancient religious book. Nobody believes that. Yeah, we're supposed to believe that today 8.3 billion people on this planet all came from one male and one female. How silly is that? Who in the world would ever believe that? Well, how about secular scientists today? Are they reading Genesis and they got excited about it? No, they typically don't like the Bible. They're coming to that conclusion through genetics. And I got to keep it brief. Males are the only ones that have a Y chromosome. So by studying the Y chromosome in males all over the planet, they can tell they have all received their Y chromosome from a single copy that got distributed. Females are the only ones that pass on something called mitochondrial DNA. Most of our DNA is in the nucleus, but there's little loops of DNA in the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell, and only females pass that on. So by studying the mitochondrial DNA of females all over the planet, they've concluded that they've all received theirs from a single copy that got distributed, one male and one female. Who would have thunk? Well, if you take the Bible seriously, you would have thunk that a long time ago. They're starting to catch up. And then again, I will praise you for I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. That's what I was taught. Well, I'm going to share some super cool stuff about DNA. You're going to really like this. This will be a highlight. Information in your DNA, the thing that makes you who you are, your physical body and all of that, it's really, really, really complex, and there's no way evolution can account for this. So let's say you're looking at a stretch of your DNA and you're reading and it spells out, was it a rat I saw? A strange phrase. In English, we read from left to right. You may have noticed you can also read it backwards. Was it a rat I saw? It's called a palindrome. Kind of fun, not very meaningful, but you can read it both ways. This is what we've discovered about our DNA. Not only can you read sections of it, most of it forwards, you can also read it backwards. But it gets so much better than that. That was the same message. It doesn't matter which direction. You're not getting additional information by reading it backwards. Same message. Our DNA is more complex. It's more like this. Look at the word desserts. You spell that backwards, it spells stress, which is what I get when I don't get desserts. So forwards and backwards, but guess what? Our DNA is more complex than that. We don't have little words in our DNA that you can read forwards and backwards. We have up to entire chapters of complex instructions that can be read both forwards and backwards. Let me give you an analogy I made up. Let's say you all have a job working at a cell phone company, and it's your training, your job to write the instruction manual to give to the manufacturing plant so they can make the phones. That's what you do. Boss comes here one day and says, I got a project for you. I need you to write the chapter in the manual that explains how the phone's going to download apps from the web. And you say, yeah, I can do that. Then he's walking away, and then kind of like Columbo, he turns around and he goes, wait, just one more thing. When you write that chapter, you have to write it in such a way, if we read your chapter backwards, it will explain how the phone's going to play music files. And you're like, oh, that's a good one, boss. He goes, no, I'm serious. We only have so much room in the manual. Your chapter of instructions has to make sense both directions. All right, that's humanly impossible. You can't even program a computer to do that. I did programming for 12 years. Can't be done. But this is what we have in our DNA. You read a stretch, certain direction, very set of complex instructions, coding to make specific proteins that carry out a special function in your body. Now you read it backwards, a completely different set of instructions, coding to make completely different proteins carrying out a completely different function in your body. Two major points with this. Particles banging together, which is what evolution is. First, you have a big bang making hydrogen and helium, a little bit of lithium. Particles keep banging together, and eventually the Earth is here, eventually you are here. Particles banging together over time will never create an information system you could read forwards and backwards. And secondly, if you had that and you start making random changes to it, which is evolution, mutations, random copying errors, you're not going to make it better and better. You're going to destroy it faster and faster. Oh, but it gets better than that. Not only do we have forwards and backwards messages that I just described, we also have overlapping messages, splice messages, embedded messages, encrypted messages, 3D messages, and 4D messages all in your DNA. I don't have time to go through each one of those. One brief comment on the encrypted message. I actually had 3 interviews with the CIA to work in their cryptographic analysis division. Creepy story for some other time. coding and decoding messages. We have that in our DNA. How does that happen? By particles just banging together over time? It doesn't. This is beautifully designed. I have a two-part video series on this called Evolution Probable or Problematic. I go through all those details if you want. All of our videos are free and they're not DVDs anymore. They're streamable, so you can get those from our website. So that was the origin of mankind. How about the Bible? They told me I was wrong about the Bible. What does it say about itself? That all scripture is inspired and breathed out by God. A professor said, no, it just contains biased thoughts of ancient people and it's been corrupted and over time been disproven by science. That's what they told me. What may research turn up? Fascinating. First, I was told I had to choose. What are you going to believe? Do you believe the Bible or do you believe science? That's an awkward question to have to address. I mean, I'm a Christian. I didn't want to deny the Bible, but I like science too. It's like, that's the wrong, there's an assumption embedded in there. The assumption is that science has disproved the Bible. If it has, you got to choose, but it hasn't. Not at all. So then they'll say, yeah, but no real scientist believes the Bible. Truth is, most major areas of science we have today were founded by Bible-believing Christians. If you'd like some examples, I usually carry a few with me. So here we go. Antiseptic surgery, bacteriology, calculus, chemistry, computer science, electronics, electrodynamics, electromagnetics, fluid mechanics, galactic astronomy, gas dynamics, genetics, hydraulics, hydrostatics, oceanography, optical mineralogy, paleontology, pathology, physical astronomy, stratigraphy, thermodynamics, thermokinetics, vertebrate paleontology, and scientific method, all founded by Bible-believing Christians. Science owes its origins to Christianity. It was birthed out of the Christian community. Secular scientists know that. They just don't like to talk about it or admit it a whole lot. But then the skeptic will say, yeah, but there's no evidence that God wrote the Bible. I always have a very gracious question for them. What would you accept as evidence? What would that look like? If you saw A, B, or C, yeah, that would definitely be evidence that God wrote the Bible. Well, I don't know, but I know there's no evidence. Wait a minute. If by your own admission, you don't even know what the evidence would look like, how do you know it doesn't exist? In fact, if you don't have a criteria that you use to judge what counts and what doesn't, we can't really even have this conversation. So they'll make that claim, but they really have nothing to back that up with. And let's say that somewhere in some attic, in someone's house, somewhere on the planet, there's a bunch of books, and one of those books was actually written by God. How would you know? Seriously, how would you know that book was actually written by God? Well, like me with my logical mind, if God actually wrote a book, I would expect at least four things, actually more, but we'll just do four. Four things I would expect. Number one, I would expect it to be internally consistent. It wouldn't truly contradict itself. If it does, probably good evidence God didn't write that. It would be historically accurate. Gets history wrong? No, I don't think God wrote that. Prophetically accurate. If it makes predictions about the future that have been proven false, pretty powerful evidence. God did not write that. He would know the future. And then scientifically accurate. If it makes statements that can actually be tested directly by science that have been proven false, that's pretty good evidence. God didn't write that because God would know science. We have very abbreviated time here, so I'm going to give you just one example from science. Normally, I get to talk about astronomy and geology and biology. We're just going to hit one thing from biology with the time that we have, but it is really, really cool. Exodus 15:26, if thou wilt diligently hearken to the voice of the Lord thy God, he will put none of these diseases upon thee. What's going on there? Well, Israelites are in Egypt as slaves. And then Charlton Heston leads them out. You might know that was Moses, that's right. Moses leads them out. And then they wander in the wilderness for 40 years. They're camping. Well, they're going to have to be very careful with cooking and things like that. God gives them special dietary laws and things like that, largely for their safety and their health. So Moses wrote that for them. But we know that Moses was educated in all the wisdom of the Egyptians. He went to Egypt, Well, today, if someone goes to a state university, you get a PhD, and then they write some books, you would fully expect a lot of the information they learn at the university would be in the books. That's kind of how it works. Well, Moses goes to Egypt, and he wrote 5 books. Yeah, the first 5 books of the Bible. He probably read some of them. So do we see Egyptian wisdom in the Bible? We should if Moses made it up on his own. And that's what skeptics say. Ignorant goat herder just scribbled some stuff down. Now we got another religious option out there for us. Well, let's look at his education. This is the Ebers Papyrus, written in 1550 BC, contains over 800 magical formulas and remedies. One of which was if you got a splinter, they told you to apply worm blood and donkey dung. Modern scientists say, yikes, you don't want to do that. It causes tetanus spores, you can get lockjaw, you could get really sick, you could even die. That's the kind of stuff Moses learned. So do we see things like that in the Bible? We should if he just made it up. Let's look at what we actually see from Moses. He talked about touching a dead body. Today we know all about bacteria and germ theory. You don't want to touch a dead animal. You could get sick from that, maybe even die. This is what Moses wrote about that, Numbers chapter 19. Whoever touches a dead body of anyone will be unclean for 7 days. He must wash themselves in the water purification on the 3rd day, and on the 7th day, and then he'll be clean. Okay, well, what's this water purification he mentions? He was nice enough a few verses earlier to tell us what that is. He says the priest is to take some cedar wood, hyssop, scarlet wool, and throw them on the burning heifer or cow. That sounds bizarre. Most of you are old enough to remember the Beverly Hillbillies. It sounds like something Granny would come up with in the kitchen, put some possum in a pot and stir it around. She's always doing weird things. That's what this sounds like from Moses. But modern scientists have looked at that and they say, no, that's not weird at all. That's fascinating. And here's why. The cedar wood and the heifer ashes combine to make lye, which is a caustic soda. We call it soap. You touch a dead animal or dead body, washing with soap would be a good thing. The hyssop plant converts into thiamol, which is like isopropyl alcohol. It kills bacteria. Touch a dead body, killing bacteria would come in handy. Scarlet wool forms a gritty substance like a steel wool pad, or if you ever use orange goop, it has pumice in it, it's abrasive, can scour and get things out. And then applying it on the 3rd and the 7th day, bacteria grow very well in a wet environment. So you want to wait a few days for everything to dry out. Then you apply this. Wait a few more days for it to dry out, you apply it a second time, and you're considered clean. Modern scientists say that's a great natural remedy if you don't have antibiotics that we create today. Did Moses know anything about bacteria and germ theory and isopropyl alcohol? Obviously not. This is God saying, hey, Mo, write it down. And he writes it down. And there's so much more. I wish I had time to talk about the other areas of science as well. Last thing I'm going to finish with. They told me I was wrong about Jesus. That's pretty significant. So we'll look into this extremely briefly. What does the Bible teach? It says, you are the Messiah, the Son of God. And then Jesus claimed, I am the way, the truth, and life. No one comes unto the Father but by me. Pretty bold claims. What do my professors claim? Well, he's just a fictional character, or maybe simply a religious leader and a good moral teacher. Most people are like, well, yeah, Jesus, he's not like God and the only way to heaven, but he was a good moral teacher. That was their view. Well, what did my research reveal? Well, good moral teacher? That didn't make sense to me. Jesus actually claimed to be God and the only way to heaven. If he wasn't really God, that means he lied about it. Well, if he lied, is he a good moral teacher? Well, he didn't lie. He just thought he was God. Well, then he's delusional. If he's delusional, does that make him a good moral teacher? No. The only thing that makes sense is he actually is who he said he is. He's the Son of God. He's God himself. And then prophecy. He not only made these claims and did some miracles, but he also fulfilled the prophecies that were predicted for this coming Messiah, probably about 300 of them. What are the chances that he wasn't really God? He just showed up, claimed he was, and he just by accident fulfilled the prophecies. We're not even going to look at all 300. What are the chances he fulfilled just 48 of these major ones? Well, one chance in 10 to the 157th power, which is one chance in a 1 followed by 157 zeros. A 1 followed by 80 zeros is the number of atoms in the entire universe. It's a big number. This is 1 to the 157, but it's so big, it's just kind of meaningless. So how many of you ever played with the Rubik's Cube? The rest of you are lying or too lazy to raise your hands. A Rubik's Cube actually has 10 million trillion different combinations. So if you're blindfolded and you're spinning it away randomly, you have one chance in 10 million trillion of getting it right. No sane person says, yeah, I could do that. We realize, okay, yeah, that's not going to happen. Let's compare Jesus fulfilling just 48 of these prophecies to someone solving the Rubik's Cube. It'd be like me handing you the cube, putting the blindfold on, and you start spinning it randomly, and you solve that cube 8 times in a row, getting it right every single time. Is that ever going to happen? No. I think this is pretty good evidence that Jesus is who he said he is. And then there's all the resurrection details, which I don't have time to go into. It's the best attested event in ancient history. I'm going to be interviewing the world's leading expert in the resurrection on one of my podcasts, hopefully relatively soon. So much evidence for that, but I'm running out of time. So one last Spockism here and the way I was thinking logically. It hit me. Which makes more sense logically? I'm not even talking religiously here. I'm just talking looking at logic. What makes more sense to me? That if I were to die and stand before God, he's going to end up judging me based on whatever standard I made up? He goes, oh, that's cool. Yeah, whatever. That's fine. Or does it make more sense he would use his own standard? To me, it makes a lot more sense. He's going to use his own standard. And every skeptic I've ever talked to said logically, it makes more sense that God would use his own standard. Then I always ask, do you think it'd be pretty important to find out what that standard is? And they have to say yes. And so then I challenge them to look into things. So I told you I had a choice to make. Well, I made a choice. And I decided, no, the Bible's not fable. It really is fact. That's what I was taught. And there's so much evidence for that. So that's a brief synopsis of my journey. Our website, which will be up here again, the Starting Point Project. Really quickly, our resources. I didn't even bring them along, but I call them our free sources because almost everything we have now is free. We have 34 free streaming videos on a lot of different topics. And every time we do a new one, we'll add it to there for free. I have a question of the month article that's free. It's in our free monthly newsletter. All the old ones are posted for free. We have a pocket guide that's free. The 170 and growing podcasts are all free. The only thing we sell are the books, and I didn't even bring them. So those are the resources if you're interested in getting more of this information. And the main thing I do is travel around and speak. So if you're interested in having me speak somewhere, just get a hold of me. I'll see if I can fit it in the schedule. Then also Grand Canyon tours. I'm doing 7 tours this summer. Only one has room left. So if you're interested, on the table over there, I have my business card and Grand Canyon brochure. You can get a hold of us and see if we can get you on one of the tours this year. We'll be doing them next year too, but there is one left this year that still has tours. So with that, again, if you want more information, thestartingpointproject.com, and then I'll be hanging out afterwards if you have additional questions. But again, I'm completely honored to be here. Appreciate this. God bless.